Okay.
Yeah. For anybody here, just come in, this is Bob Binnie. He's a commercial beekeeper in northern Georgia, right?
Yeah, northern. We call ourselves Northeast Georgia. I'm extremely close to the corner, the northeast corner. Half my bee yards are in North Carolina, and we're only probably the way the bee flies, maybe 12 miles from the Chattooga River, which is the border for South Carolina for us. So we're kind of a tri-corner thing.
Yeah. And I think they're in the far right hand corner, there's three dots down there, and you can click on there and gives you the drop down option to raise your hand and ask
Huh?
questions. Right now, there's not too many people on here, but we get several on here. We'll have to go to raising hands. But if somebody
Okay.
wants to jump in there and ask a question to Bob right off hand, have at it. No, no question. I haven't had a chance to watch your video on the oxalic acid from uh, Georgia State there.
Well, that video really is about them setting a baseline of what doesn't work. They did the video that came out last Sunday was a report on a research study that they documented. And I mean, it was a real study. They got all the data and everything on 1 gram per box vaporization on a 5-day cycle for 7 cycles in a row. And it kept the bees, it kept the mite level static. Basically, they didn't go up and they didn't go down. And it's been kind of interesting. I've got a lot of comments on the video saying, well, of course it doesn't work. It's not enough and not close enough. But I guess I didn't make it clear enough. They're really trying to set what doesn't work. They're trying to collaborate with other universities and, provide data that I guess it's the FDA uses to establish labels. And so they're kind of climbing this ladder of kind of, okay, this doesn't work. This works a little better. This works great, but doesn't hurt the bees. And then maybe the next one up works even better, but hurts the bees. They're trying to create all this data so they can recreate the label. The legal dosage in this country is 1 gram treatment, which is just not enough. And if you're treating with brood 5 days apart is too close. So it's kind of a case, a double whammy there where it really didn't work well. And then the next version of that will, I think, be 2 grams and then 3 grams, and then maybe move a few days or a couple days closer together and slowly prove what really is the optimum protocol for that type of treatment.
Well, oxalic acid is really a good thing, but it's really just not very effective with brood in it, is it?
No, but they're learning that if you raise the dose enough, it does have some effect. Cameron Jack down there in Florida, I think he got up to 4 grams per box, and he was showing that he actually was getting, a drop in mite levels by doing that. And of course, but Jennifer's, 4 grams per box. That's 8 grams in a double deep colony, and she's of the opinion that the government's never going to okay that, but who knows? Maybe they will. So they just got to prove their case and find that sweet spot where they can get the government to provide a label that, and of course, maybe I shouldn't say this on a live Zoom thing, but I don't, I don't adhere to the label in this instance. I think most of us understand that 1 gram is just not enough, and that I'm not sure what an overdose looks like when you're vaporizing bees. I really don't. I have a few friends that use those turbos, and I mean, they just coat the inside of a hive with this stuff, and I've never seen any detrimental effects. There must be some. There's got to be a level somewhere where it's just too much. But 2 grams per box or something like that certainly is not in my view.
I had a beekeeper friend when the oxalic acid first started using it here in the United States, and he was a little concerned about it because if you get a whiff of it, it's pretty bad for the human.
Yeah.
And he took one hive and he treated it with 1 gram of oxalic acid for 30 days, one every day for 30 days. And he said he never seen no ill effects out of that.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
No.
Yeah. One gram doesn't do it.
But for every day for 30 days, that's a lot of oxalic acid, 30 grams in a month.
Yeah, you'd think that'd have an effect.
But he said he's seen no adverse effects. So then he started using on all of his hives, of course. But
Yeah.
he didn't want to go out there and kill all his hives.
Oh, so you're saying it had no adverse effects. What did it do for the mite level?
Uh, he never did say whether it did. I think he was just doing it as a safety check
Okay.
because he was
And
taking that the oxalic acid worked, and he didn't want to go out there and treat 50 of his hives and kill them all.
oh yeah. Well, let's see. I'm trying to think. Next Sunday, I'm going to post as part two on that oxalic thing where they're talking about isolating the queen and for 14 days and then treating, which did have some effect. And I think in the paperwork that I read that they stated that they could see no difference in mite drop between 2 grams per box and 3. So 2 grams per box might be the spot where you reach diminishing returns on treatment. I'm not sure. Of course, that'd be 4 grams in a double deep colony. That's what I'm doing right now is 4 grams in a double deep.
No,
And it works.
I'm using 2 grams per box also.
Yeah. Yeah, if they're broodless, that has a pretty good effect. Now we didn't. I'm sure in Indiana it's a little different, but down in our neighborhood, I'd say about half of our colonies never went 100% completely broodless. We had a very warm December, and any broodlessness that we did recognize really came
Your buddy.
back mid November, and then later on in January. But December they were rearing brood.
I'm gonna have to mute everybody, and I don't. You ought to have the be able to unmute yourself, Bob. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, I'm good there. If you can hear me.
There you go. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, it's fun to hear people, their dogs barking and the doorbell ringing and the phone's going on. And I'm guilty too.
Yeah, I am too. Nobody got a question for Bob? It's just nice to come around and talk to some beekeepers.
Yeah, it is.
This
Yeah.
cold weather. That's funny. Yesterday it was 67 degrees here. Bees flew like it was summertime. Now I'm going to be down to 4 degrees Friday night.
Wow. I drove through Indiana on my way to Iowa. I'm going to show my ignorance here a little bit. I was raised in the West. I was born in California and then moved to Alaska for a good while and then down to Oregon before I moved to Georgia 30 years ago. And I'm still not crystal clear on just where all the states are in the Northeast. And I was surprised when I drove through Indiana to find that it is touches the Great Lakes. I had no idea that Gary, Indiana was way up there on the water. And let's see, it was on the east side of Illinois, correct?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, and that surprised me too. For all my life, I thought it was on the other side of Illinois. Sometimes I don't relate to these places till I actually drive through them.
Yeah, I got Ohio on one side and Illinois on the
Yeah.
west and Ohio on the east.
Yeah, not as far as I thought to get there. Out west, that West Coast is only 3 states. California is huge from north to south. I don't know, maybe I'm just guessing, maybe 1,000 miles from the northern border to southern. I don't know. Oregon's pretty good size too. It takes you 6 hours to drive from north to south, and Washington State almost that much. And when I moved here, it took a while to sink in that these states are a lot smaller. I can go to Ohio in 8 hours, and I never would have thought that, until I moved here and experienced it. A lot of states out here.
I just got back from the west. First time I ever been west. Went to California and Arizona and all New Mexico and all them places. And what I realized, you don't get on the interstate there with less than a half tank of gas because it's going to be a long time before you see a gas station.
In some places, yeah. When I was a kid, we used to travel to Arizona from LA a lot because we had relatives out there. And I can still remember before they put in, you and I are old enough to know what it was like before all the interstates were in place. And LA to Phoenix was not an interstate when I was a teenager. And I can remember crossing the border into Arizona on that state highway and seeing a sign that said next gas 122 miles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Big out there.
Yeah. I miss it in a way. Sometimes I miss the West, but I do like living where I do in Northeast Georgia. It's very pretty here and the people are wonderful. I like it. Glad I made the move.
Uh,
Yeah.
you might explain a little bit. You're a beekeeper and a honey producer, but you're a honey packer. You might kind of explain to people what the difference between a honey packer and just a beekeeper making honey.
Well, I think in the industry, I would be termed as a producer packer. In other words, I'm a beekeeper, but to me, I don't know if this is the real definition, but to me, when you say honey packer, that's something separate from beekeeping. We actually, last year we packed 1.5 million pounds. Well, I don't produce 1.5 million pounds, so that means I had to buy a lot. Most of the honey I pack, we purchase. And I'll be real honest, right now, the honey packing is actually making more of a profit than the beekeeping. Of course, that wouldn't be, it's not unexpected at those levels of packing. And about, I guess it was about over 20 years ago, maybe 22, 23 years ago, I had a very bad season. And everybody around me had a bad season too. And we had no honey to provide the local markets and produce stands and all the stuff that's around us. And I didn't want to lose my market share. I wanted to take care of my customers. And I had a beekeeping friend down in South Georgia, Homerville, Georgia. He said, Bob, we've had a great crop down here. Why don't you come on down here and pick up some barrels and pack it and at least keep your customers happy? And I did that. I took my 3/4 ton truck down there and got 6 barrels, which is what it could haul, and brought it home and packed it up and made it available. And it was gone in just a week or two. And I thought, whoa. And I had a light bulb moment right then and there. And I said, well, maybe we can do this. And so it's from that point forward, I started buying honey, and I never fooled anybody. I never lied. I said, this is not my honey. I have kind of a generic line that I use. This honey is from a friend or friends that I know and trust, which is even at 1.5 million pounds, that's still the case. And the people I buy from, I know them and I trust them, and we have this working relationship and we get along good. And every year it just grew 10 or 15%. Well, in 20 some years, you add that 10 or 15% every year, and suddenly you got 1.5 million pounds a year. And it's been a challenge. I mean, there was keeping up with the growth and using your profit has been the challenge. That kind of growth at some point takes a lot of money to fund. It's kind of like a squirrel putting nuts away for the winter. You can't just go out and buy honey anytime you want. You need to buy it when it's available, which is summer, early fall, maybe early winter. And somehow I had to figure out how to bring all this honey in that was going to, take care of business. And that was really challenging for a very long time. And now, just in the last couple of years, I've got to the point where I actually own most of my inventory. Like right now, we've got about $2 million of honey in barrels sitting in the warehouse, and I own most of it. It's paid for. 10 or 15 years ago, a lot of that was on credit. And once I got to the place where I owned most of my inventory, suddenly I got comfortable. I didn't stay awake at night wondering how I was going to pay that $50,000 bill a week from Tuesday and stuff like that. For me, there was a lot of emotional pressure to get to where I'm at. I've always been honest with people. It was extremely rare that I was late on a payment for something. A lot of the beekeepers that I buy from allow me to pay them, multiple payments to get, the load or several loads that I purchased from them paid off. And I've been very, very blessed that sometimes when I really needed a chunk of change, something would happen. It's like the sky would open up and suddenly I'd have a great big order and I could pay that bill. And forgive me if this offends anybody. I really feel in my case that there's been a bit of grace that's helped me along the way, because I mean, there's just no explanation for how I've been able to grow to where I'm at from less than zero. When I started this back when, I was worse than broke. I was pretty well in debt, and a lot of what I did was on borrowed money, which of course is what most people say, don't do that. Don't borrow money to be a beekeeper. But I did. And I've been blessed to be successful at it. And, um, but when I moved to Oregon, I had something going for me. I had experience I'm sorry, when I moved to Georgia and got into this packing and everything else, I had something going for me that most people that start out and borrow money do not. And I had experience. I'd spent, a number of years in Oregon working for a commercial beekeeper and then working for myself before we moved to Georgia and started over again. And I knew what to do. I knew what to expect. Where a lot of people that get into beekeeping and borrow money, they don't know quite what they're doing yet. In some cases, I've seen so many people lose it and go broke and go bankrupt and lose their house because they put a mortgage on their house to, start their bee business. That's very dangerous unless you're really experienced at what you're doing and you know what to expect and what you can do. I can't count how many times I sold 3 or 4 or 500 nukes to somebody because they had a couple good years with their 10 or 15 colonies and got out a pencil, paper, and calculator and said, man, I can make money at this. And then suddenly they go into deep debt and then they have a couple bad years and they lose it all. I've seen that a number of times. So I always recommend to people not to grow too fast. Your experience has to grow with your beekeeping outfit. You can't, well, I shouldn't say you can't because I've known a couple people that have, but going from 5 to 500, it generally doesn't work. It really doesn't. You need to grow. You need to create that wisdom in you at the same rate that you're growing. And it doesn't take a long time. Most people, if they're smart and they're dedicated and very passionate about it, within about 5 years, they've got a handle on what's going on. But I like to say that most people can triple every year. If you got 10, go to 30, then 90, then 270. And in 5 years, you're to the point where you're as big as anybody might want to be. Triple every year and you'll grow as fast as your outfit is. And, that's the way to do it if you don't have any previous experience.
Yeah, from 15 to 50 is a big jump.
Yeah.
And then when you go from 50 to 100,
yeah.
it might be a bigger jump.
Yeah. Seth, some of you have watched a couple of videos I put out with Seth, who works for me. Nice young guy. He's just 21, going to turn 22 here shortly. And he went from 8 to 80 last year. Now I was thinking of giving him a 8 to 80 kid t-shirt for his birthday. We'll see if we can find one of those, get one made. And but he never could have done that if he wasn't working for me. He was just replicating what we were doing in my outfit, and so he was able to do that. But somebody with just a year or two experience, that would be very hard to pull off.
Well, when you work with a commercial beekeeper, you learn so much in a short amount of time too.
Well, you do. And the key is to be, once you become immersed in it, it's your living and it's what you do for 8 or 10 or 12 hours a day. That's when you really start soaking up the information and the wisdom. And, there's wisdom and knowledge are not synonymous. I like to say that knowledge is what you can learn by reading a book, but wisdom is what you get when you put your hands on and you do it. And that's what takes a little bit of time. You can read all the books out there and have that done in 6 months, but you don't get the wisdom until you get your hands on it and get dirty and do it for a few years. That takes a little time.
And a lot of people, I have trouble making YouTube videos because I don't think about the people, what they don't know. It's something I do every day, and I don't relate to the small things. That it's a big thing to them, but a small thing to me because I just do it every day, and you do too.
Yeah.
As soon as you open the frame up and you pull a frame out of the middle and look at it, and you say, "There's no queen in this box." I mean, you know that quick.
Yeah.
I mean, I was here a couple of years ago. I was selling nukes out. Opened the box up, and as soon as I got the lid off it, they revved up. I thought, I just checked them, pulled the frame out of it, put it back in, and said, "We gotta go place else. There's no queen in this box." He said, "Really?" I said, "You can look in there if you want, but there's no queen in this box. She's gone."
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, it's the kind of stuff that comes with practice or experience. see. Garden State apiaries. Is that New Jersey?
Let's see. Y'all be able to unmute yourself.
We're in the great state of New Jersey,
New Jersey.
exit 7A. They call it the Garden State, but I'm not sure. I'm not so sure how many gardens we have up here anymore. We got more warehouses than anything. Nice to speak to you guys. Thanks for coming on. Enjoy your videos. I wanted to find out real quick, now that you called me out, do you guys do anything for habitat conservation in terms of pollinators, number one? Number two, and giving back, et cetera, any kind of excess planting or things like that, other than what's naturally out there. Second thing is, here in this state, if it says local honey and we're selling it, we have people that are, oh, well, what town is this from? And if, God forbid that you're in the next town over, they think regardless of how far a bee will forage that, it's not considered local honey and it's not going to be any good. How do you get around that? We have a lot of competition up here. So me trying to get in and market our product into other facilities, other markets, et cetera, when and I don't want to cut anybody else's potential for selling stuff either, but honey is not all just honey. And, we don't have maybe, I would say for ourselves, maybe 3 flows throughout the year. We have a nice, very light black locust, then we have a clover and linden, and then on good years we might have some aster and some goldenrod in the fall, but not a lot. So just kind of wondering about how you go about that. Thank you.
In Georgia, we have 3 regions. We have what's called the coastal plain, which is not just on the coast. It's low elevation. It's where the ocean used to be 1 million years ago or something. And the soil is sandier, the weather's hot, there's lots of bugs, extremely humid. And the flora in that area is different than when you come up to the middle part of Georgia. In fact, in Georgia, they actually call themselves Middle Georgia. And that means a region. And we know that region is the Piedmont. Piedmont stands for rolling forested plain, and then the flora is different there. And then where you come to the mountain region where I live, it's a little bit like the Piedmont, but we have a few things they don't. So in Georgia, if you're on the Piedmont anywhere and you say it's local honey, to me that means local to the Piedmont region because it's all the same thing. And
Yeah.
then, we pick up honey out of South Georgia and we just put a label on it that says South Georgia wildflower. Now, I know some people will take issue with that and say, well, you're 2 towns over, you couldn't possibly be local. But in my view, if it's exactly the same flora and it's in the same region, why couldn't you call that local? We sell to Kroger's, they're our biggest account. And when they consider something local, they say if it's within 500 miles, they're happy to call it local. Of course, they're doing that with produce and other
Sure.
things besides just honey. But I think if it's the same region and the same floral source, I feel comfortable calling it local. Atlanta is just 125 miles south of us. And if you go about 30 miles south of our shop, you're on the upper Piedmont, and Atlanta is on the Piedmont also. And I'm quite happy to tell those people in Atlanta that my Piedmont honey should be considered local to you. And I think it just comes down to a personal opinion and, just be honest. I always be honest with people. I said, this is the deal. You're 100 miles away, but, it's exactly the same stuff. Why wouldn't you want to call it local? Now, let me tell you something. I know where people are going with this local honey a lot, and they're making a mistake. They think if you're buying local honey to fight allergies, that's the answer. And there's more to it than that. They did a study in Great Britain about 12 or 15 years ago and compared raw honey from anywhere to local honey that had been filtered and perhaps pasteurized, and found out that honey from Egypt is going to do you more good with your allergies because of the unique enzymes in honey than local honey that's been filtered. So I don't try to explain that to many customers because they don't want to hear that. They think that local honey is their answer. Even their doctor told them. But I think what's happening in many cases where people are experiencing benefit from local honey is that if you go to a local beekeeper and buy honey, in most cases, you're getting raw honey.
Mhm.
And of course, raw local is the best of both worlds, of course, but a lot of people are completely ignorant about it's the enzymes in raw honey that are doing more good than anything.
Right. How about the pollinator question? You guys do anything with, conservation in terms of, giving back? And, we have a big issues. I try to do a little bit in our area to try to plant some native wildflowers and some fields and stuff like that of, buckwheat, work with some farmers to try to get some areas that are cleared out and try to put some native stuff down in there to try to offset what we're seeing in terms of habitat loss. This year, I hope to do a little bit more in terms of some acreage, so that'll be good.
Well, I'm not trying to hog the mic, but I'll report and then anybody else can talk. Where I live, it's a non-issue. Most of our honey comes from the woods. There are some fields, but 90% of our floral source is from the woods and the mountains. And so what you're experiencing in New Jersey is a completely different situation than, I plant a perennial garden out in front of our business that has bee-friendly plants. And I recommend to people, if they're going to put a shade tree out front, plant a linden tree or something like that. But we don't have the problem, so we don't have to address it.
I plant where I've got my other bee yards on is other people's property, and they're on a little bit of acreage, and they usually let it grow up into what I call a natural field. They mow it once every fall, and then let it grow back up, and has all kinds of flowers and stuff in it. But I've been planting a little bit of tall yellow clover in there, and some other things but basically for myself. Of course, there's other bees around here. There's a lady on here I talked to earlier and found out she got a bee yard about a mile's crow flies from that yard that I'm talking about. So other than that, I don't do much. We have a lot of fence rows here. They're not like they do out in Kansas, just acres and acres and acres and no fence rows. We still got quite a few fence rows in my particular area. I was explained one time, Bob, that local honey, by the government standpoint, is the agriculture zones, like 4, 5, 6. If it's in zone 5, that's all local honey, no matter where, if it's out in zone 5, because all the same flora grows in that zone.
Well, I think they're stretching it a bit with that. Zone 5 is a pretty big region.
Yeah.
Are you in zone 5, Joe?
I forget what zone I'm in. I forget now.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's 5B or something. I think I'm in.
Okay.
Southern part of zone 5.
Looks like you have several questions there now.
Yeah. Okay. Malcolm, let me see here. You're up. Unmute yourself there, Malcolm.
All right, am I unmuted now?
Yeah, you are.
Well, first of all, hey, Joe, it's nice talking to you. It's been a few years. And Bob, I want to appreciate you for all the information that you have given me the last couple of years. We've talked at both conferences that Caveman has given. But anyway, what I want to ask about today is, it might be a silly question, I don't know, but I've kind of expanded in such a manner that I've got to put my honey somewhere else, and I'm not big enough for barrels yet, so I'm still using buckets. Is it okay to let honey freeze? And because I know you don't keep your honey in a heated building.
Well, if you're looking at it from a quality point of view, the colder you store it, the better you are. Let's see. I wrote an article for Bee Culture magazine several years ago. You can Google it and it comes up easily. It's called Processing Honey / A Closer Look. And in that article, I talk about how the enzymes and the color and the flavor degrade with changes in temperature. And it's pretty amazing how rising temperatures change the quality of honey. most beekeepers don't realize just how bad it is. But if you freeze honey, the change is almost nothing, very extremely minimal. It won't crystallize in many cases. The enzymes do not degrade at all. They just become dormant. And then once you heat the honey back up to room temperature, the enzyme activity, comes to the forefront again. But if you store honey, even at room temperature, eventually it degrades to the point where the enzymes are dead, the color is changed, the flavor has changed, the aroma has changed, everything has changed. I'll give you a little example. I don't know why this one sticks with me, but it does. For instance, there's three enzymes in honey, major enzymes: invertase, glucose oxidase, and diastase. And diastase used to be used in the old days for measuring how much heat honey had been exposed to, because apparently the activity of diastase is easy to measure in a lab. And if you hold honey at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, the half-life of diastase is 1,000 days. If you raise that temperature up to 122 degrees Fahrenheit, the half-life is 2 weeks. And if you raise it up to 176, the half-life is 30 seconds. So you can see even at room temperature, it's degrading. But the colder you go, the less degrading you have. So I'm giving you a long answer to a short question, but freezing is actually the best thing you can do for your honey if you need to hold it over time and take care of the quality.
Thank you very much. Yeah, because in the winter time is when I have to store most of it, and it'll be in a shed outside. I just built a shed, and I thought I'd just put it there. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, Kenny, Bach, you're up. Just unmute yourself there. We're not hearing you. You're unmuted, but no, still not hearing you.
How about now?
Yeah, now
Yeah.
we are.
Okay, a little bit ago, you mentioned isolating the queen for 14 days, then treating your mites. My plans for this year is to isolate for 3 weeks after they pull the honey supers off. We're pretty much here in Southeast Ohio, go into dearth before July. So she's on the downward laying at that time too. I was going to cage her for 21 days, release her, let her start laying again, and then 3 days later, which would be the 24th day, so any drone brood that would possibly be present would be emerged or emerging, and then treat then. Does that sound like a pretty good plan? I know you couldn't do it on a scale like you do, but with a few as high as I've got, that's my plan.
That's actually a superb plan. It's funny you're bringing that up. That's actually what I'm going to put a video out from the UGA lab on that on probably Sunday morning, sometime soon. I'm working on it right now. And that's exactly what we were talking about at the lab there. They did 14 days, which works if you don't have any drones. If you have drones, if you can wait just 3 or 4 days longer, then it works. And the math is easy to do. But yeah, what you're talking about is a superb plan. It does work.
Are they talking about just caging the queens and leaving them in the hive?
No, Jennifer came up with a pretty interesting point.
I want to elaborate on that. I got a kick with that. Go ahead.
Okay, well, Cameron Jack did this same sort of study down in Florida, and he had a lot of problems with the colonies at the end of the study, getting them through winter. He literally put them in a cage. Jennifer put the queen above a queen excluder on a single drawn comb and let her lay for that 14 days. And her reasoning was, queen mandibular pheromone was still being spread around, and she was still functioning basically. And then after 14 days, they pulled the excluder out and let her, have the whole colony. and they took that single frame that she had been laying on and either gave it to another colony that wasn't in the study, or in some cases actually threw it away. If you're trying to rotate comb out, several combs a year, that could be an old dark comb that you want to just throw away. And it worked. I've got some data that I'm actually going to show in the video, a little chart that Lewis made up that shows the differences, and it does work. Your plan is really legit, and they had no problems with the queens doing it that way. They had no colony mortality or queen failure or any of that by doing that. And they said, Lewis points out in the video that one of the neat things about that method is that you don't absolutely have to find the queen. All you have to do is put an empty frame in a super, either surrounded by foundation or honeycomb or something. Just only give her that one comb to lay on, and just shake all the bees in there, and then the queen stuck above the excluder, and the rest of the bees will go down to the box below with the brood that you've shaken off. And you don't have, for beginners, it would be fine. You don't have to find the queen.
We've done there've been some studies done. If you just cage a queen and leave her in there for a long time, that's part of when they, bank queens. The bees will chew on the pads on the queens.
That's
and
right.
then when you release them, they'll probably supersede the queens.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
That's where I was going with that point.
Yeah, that's part of the problem with buying queens from some very large queen producers. In order to make orders and keep things flowing, they often bank queens for a week or two, and you get a little bit of that kind of stuff going on. So yeah, I'm with you 100% on that one.
And they chew on these JZB cages worse than they do war cages.
Yeah, I heard that. I saw, where did I see that? Somewhere I saw data on that. Literally, somebody did some research, and I think the holes are bigger, right?
The holes are bigger, yeah.
Yeah, sure enough.
And they chew them. In fact, the California cages has got finer screen. They got regular screen wire on them. Why they decided to do that? That's the best cage to put them in, really, but they're confined.
I really like that cage. The only drawback to that cage is there's not much room for attendance if you're trying to move those queens around with attendants in the cage. But besides that, they are absolutely the best cage. Yeah.
What do you think of that? That's what I've been making. That's a regular 3-hole side cage. That's what I sell mine in.
Yeah. Well, the drawback to me on those cages is that you have to kind of separate the combs and smash it into your comb a bit. That's one of the reasons I like the California cage, because it's so small. It has a very small footprint inside your colony. But every one of them there's pros and cons to every single one of these cages.
The plastic ones, you can't see the queens in them. I hate that.
Yeah, if you're trying to see if it's marked or not, it's kind of hard.
Yeah.
We use mostly the plastic ones because we can put attendants in them when we sell queens. But the California cage is my favorite.
When I put in the hives here, I use California cages because there's always room to get them in there without taking a frame out.
Yeah, good cage.
But you can take the regular 3-hole cage and just turn it down, do the 1/2-inch way.
Yeah, I've seen those, that whatever size hole that is in those 3-hole Benton cages. I've seen cages that were made with a single hole, and that's not a bad. You still have that width though that kind of makes you have to smash it into the comb to fit it in there.
That's what that is. That's a regular 3-hole size cage there with a solid with a California slot in it.
Yeah,
because I can do that with a router.
Is that narrower than a 3-hole then?
No, it's the exact same size as a 3-hole cage.
Yeah, you could get a couple of attendants in that.
Yeah, and
Joe, you making your own queen cages too?
I'm a tightwad. I gotta have something to do in the wintertime.
I guess.
Yeah, I do. But if there's not room, I stand it up, and people say you want to put the candy down, and I totally disagree with that.
Why?
Why do they put the candy up? They say put the candy up, so if the bees fall out, they'll come out the top. Well, if it gets hot in there and that candy melts, you've killed all the
Yep.
queen. The other
Uh-huh.
way, she'll be in there for a week, and you come back, she'll still be alive. Knock the bees out and let her out.
Yeah, I'm a proponent of putting it, or put it sideways, kind of slanted down a little bit. That's a good, if that's showing up in the screen.
Yeah.
Sideways, but down a little bit. That's kind of what we try to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No more questions here?
There was several hands up there at one point. There's a hand.
Where do you see a hand at? I don't even see a hand on my screen.
Let's see, what's his name? Jim Duffy or Duff T. Okay.
Oh, you know what? Usually this thing puts it at the top when there's a hand raised, and it's not doing that. Go ahead, Jim.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for Bob and Joe both for bringing this on. I'm learning a few things right now. And talking, when you guys are talking, I'm saying, oh yeah, but what about this? What about that? Anyway, love everything both of you guys are doing. Anyway, have you had any luck with the oxalic acid pads or anything like that? Like that, what Randy Oliver has been talking about? You know what he's been doing?
I've not done the sponge thing. I've not been
Yeah.
involved in. We tried the blue paper towels and with disastrous results a few years ago. But I've also learned something, and that was part of a University of Georgia study that I was involved in. And I've spoken to several beekeepers since then that have kind of come up with their own way of doing things. And they're of the opinion that the dosages recommended in those towels, again, are too small, that you have to put more oxalic in them than was initially recommended.
Now they're talking like 25% and 25%.
Yeah, a
50,
lot.
50.
Yeah. So I've not done any experimenting with the most recent advice, but originally I tried them with UGA and just disastrous results. I lost a bunch of colonies.
What is UGA? What is that?
University of Georgia. It stands for University of Georgia, Athens.
Oh, okay.
It's the university is in Athens, Georgia. They have a pretty good bee lab going on. I mean, they've been putting out research data for an extremely long time. People don't really give them their due. What was that man? Keith Delaplane runs that lab, but now Jennifer Berry's really kind of got control of things. And before Keith, there was another man that was running research out of there, and he was pretty well known. I see his name pop up in a lot of, being quoted in research and stuff, and I can't remember his name. He was from out of the country. He'd come in from some Eastern European country, and for some reason I can't remember his name. But yeah, that lab's been putting out data for a long time.
Great. Well, one more, and I'll let somebody else have a chance. Are you doing any insemination of queens yourself?
No, but I don't know if you saw that video with the Shabu Raj that we put out. I have a friend over in Tennessee. First of all, I don't want to do it. And plus the expense and the learning curve to get good at it. I just rather pay him $250 and let him do what I want. But we are grafting from artificially inseminated queens, have been for probably 5 or 6 years. I've been wanting to move my stock towards Caucasian Carniolan, and we're really getting there now. We'll never get rid of all the Italian, and I don't think I need to or want to get rid of all of the Italian. I think a little bit of that mixed in with what we're doing is a good thing. It's kind of like a mutt dog. Sometimes a mutt dog's healthier and stronger than a purebred. But we're highly Caucasian Carniolan with a little spattering of Italian because, we're open mating with other things that are around us. And we're there now in most of our yards. We have, 40 bee yards or something like that. And we just went through them all, just spot checking about 2 weeks ago. I was so pleased. Just looking at the color of the bees, you can tell that what we've been doing is taking hold now. In our region, I got to be careful when I talk about these bees. In our region, this combination that we're creating works very, very well. If you just go 100 miles south of us, it's not the ideal bee because it's so hot down there. And middle South Georgia and on into Florida. Up in the mountains, our temperatures, 95 is a pretty hot day for us in the summer. We do get tremendous humidity, but we don't get that 100-degree plus stuff that they do south of us. And this bee is overwinters very frugally. They small clusters. Most of our clusters right now are just ranging 4 to 7 frames, and I like it that way. Now, if I was pollinating in California or trying to rear pack or sell packages in March, that would be the wrong bee. But just trying to get through the winter up here in the mountains with a minimal amount of food, a pretty low percentage of winter loss, and they're getting through on just a few frames of food before they start brooding up. This is the ideal bee for me, and I'm really liking it. We're achieving that with artificial insemination.
Yeah, I love the Caucasian line. That I live in North Dakota during the summertime,
Oh
and
my.
they are wonderful up there. You know, it could be 40 degrees out, and they're out flying around looking for food.
That's right. Yeah, they get out early, don't they? And it can even be a little drizzle, and they're out there working too sometimes. Italians, it's a little different. And I'm convinced that they're a little hardier. I know a lot of guys are having luck, breeding for hygienic behavior and VSH and all that stuff with Italian bees. But maybe I'm being biased. I don't know, but I think the darker bees they start out with a step up over the Italians when it comes to disease and issues. I think they are already a little ahead. I'd like to kind of half jokingly say that the South Georgia golden Italians, which are so beautiful and so gentle and so prolific at making bees, they come down with every little sniffle that comes along. The Caucasians and Carniolans don't do that.
Yeah, I got my stock from Joe, and just they're really nice bees. So
Oh,
what
Joe,
can you
you
say?
got Caucasian bees?
I do.
I didn't know that. Okay.
He's some really good ones, and they're pretty low mite counts.
Really? Are you artificially inseminating, Joe?
I am.
Oh, there's a
He does a little bit of everything.
another source for more genetic diversity. Okay.
Some good genetics there, Bob. Good
Yeah.
genetics. I at least, I'm just a hobbyist, so but really nice bees, incredibly nice.
Yeah, I had Caucasians back in the 80s when I was in Oregon. I was getting them out of Northern California, and I really, really loved them. Of course, they were Caucasian queens open mating in Northern California, so there was plenty of Italian influence there. But man, I really liked them. And then when I got to Georgia in the mid 90s, I was buying from a fella in Mississippi. Joe's been at this a while. He might remember this name, Holman Holder in Mississippi was a Caucasian breeder, and his bees were so gentle and so nice to work with. And he went out of business, and I kind of got away from that. And now I'm making my own effort to get those lines going. And I'm really they're gentle. I really like them. So Joe, he mentioned that you have low mite counts. How are you doing that? What are you doing to bring about mite resistant bees?
Uh, well, I run quite a bit of VSH in mine,
Okay.
and then I've got 2 lines of chewers, and not the Purdue Vite Maulers. I've run them for a couple of years, and I ain't bad mouthing Purdue or nothing, but I just don't like their bee.
Yeah.
The original Martha Carpenter bee is a chewer, big time, and they pretty well take care of themselves. They just never have any mites, and they chew small hive beetles. When I was testing them, I put sticky boards down and tested them, and I seen all these shells, these small hive beetles in the bottom, and they chewed them up. They kill them.
Is that something that you picked up somewhere, or have you been achieving that within your own apiary?
Go lay down, dog. It comes from Martha Carpenter. Bill Carpenter. He was out of New York. He moved to Florida. Him and his wife run this open line, made it because they wasn't around nowhere. And he actually, myself and Jason Braggs got the last breeders he sold before he killed his bees off. He fed a bunch of old corn syrup they thought was a year old, and kind of getting old and killed everything. And he
Oh,
actually tried to buy the breeders back. So we've got the semen stored, and I've kept
Oh.
that line going and run my line out of. I got some VSH that I put in with the chewers that to complement. I'm not a research person. I mean, Jason Braggs does more research than I do, and I have found when you get too much VSH in it, you start getting a little bit of aggressiveness in the bees.
Oh, really? Okay.
When you get it too strong, but a little of it. Typically, do I treat? Absolutely, I treat. You can't have that many bees and take a chance.
Yeah.
But this year, for whatever reason, I was sick over in the spring, and I didn't get treated till way late. So I went through and checked them all. I had 0 mite counts in the whole yard except for 4 hives, and they was absolutely just loaded. And one of them was a Caucasian hive, and usually the Caucasians is not too bad about it, but for whatever reason they was. And then I've got a line of bees that come from southern Georgia years ago, and they just keep surviving, but they have mite loads unreal. And I'm thinking that they might be something to do with taking care of the viruses. Because it don't seem to make them sick. I can treat. I mean, they can have a mite load of 100 in a wash and go out there and treat them, and they never die. You take it, most other hives, it's got that big a mite load. You treat them, you just wipe. They're not going to make it.
Yeah.
And in fact, 2 years ago, I was going to inseminate out of that just to try them. And I come in, got my 200 drones and come in here, and I had mites running all over my hands. And I said, I hate doing this. I took them back and turned them all loose.
Oh, really?
But I've got my line I really like. They produce a little more honey than most of the hives I've got for whatever reason. I was going for mite resistance and got the they probably another 20% better on honey production. They really do a good job.
Wow.
And that particular line, the Martha Carpenters, we took the wings and had them sent off where they do that wing morphology and tell you what line they were. And they actually got a whole bunch of the old German bee in them.
Oh, really? Huh.
But they're not aggressive. The old German bees, they'd nail your socks, but they're not aggressive.
Interesting.
And so I just kind of been peeling around the edges. And seemed to do pretty good on most of them.
I see this Dan Leiter.
Latner? Oh, got somebody else there got a hand up?
Yeah.
I don't know why they ain't doing that. Usually it puts them right at the top of the list. Zoom. Dan, you got a question? Unmute yourself there. I can't unmute you. You have to unmute yourself. Click on unmute.
No, I didn't have a question, Joe. I don't know why the hand's up.
Okay. Well, anybody else got a question? We get to talking. I just enjoy there we go. Lee, go ahead.
What would be the best temperature you'd say for oxalic acid treatments?
I'm gonna go with Bob Binnie's. 48 degrees is perfect.
Yeah, I would agree. You want it as warm as it can be and not have them flying.
So like today, I'm in South Louisiana and we've got up to 78 degrees today.
Yeah, well,
Hey, Mike.
I mean,
you're on a different planet down there now.
and then Friday, we're looking at a low of 28. So, I mean, we
What?
up and down. I mean, it's crazy here.
Yeah,
Wow.
when I send the crew out, I tell them anywhere between 40 and 50 is fine, and the closer you can get to that 45, 48, the better off, because the cluster loosens up so the fumes penetrate, but yet you don't want them flying. So it's really mostly about them not flying and not having a tight cluster.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bob, I've got a simple question,
Okay.
and that is, I noticed on your videos that when you find a queen that's not marked, you mark her and
Every
put it right
time.
back on the frame. Do you have a problem with them taking the mark off?
Sometimes, yeah, if sometimes they want to lick it off right away if it's still wet. But I don't have time to hang out for 3 minutes and let it dry, so it's kind of a quantity instead of quality sort of thing. But we do mark every queen, and most of it stays. I mean, it's helpful. It helps us a lot.
I noticed too on your video with Chris Warner, he has a new pen that he didn't give the brand for, but you showed a picture of it. Are you having better luck with that pen?
Zoom on my
Yeah,
tablet. I don't
we're
have a
using
hand up there.
we're using that pen, and we get them really, really cheap out of California. Let's see, I've got some over here. Hold on, give me a second. Okay, it's let's see if I can put this up to the cameras so it shows it. It's called a Competitive Advantage MP15, and we like them because they work as good as anything we've tried, and they're really cheap. When we buy about 75 at a time, and they're $1.08 each. And I don't know if you bought just 5 or 10, I'm sure they'd be more, but still. And then we used the Posca brand for a long time simply because that's what everybody was selling. And they're not the same pen they were 10 years ago. Those things just don't work that great anymore. I really like this pen. It works good.
How small tips that got on it?
Well, they call it a medium. I know it's got a thousandth of an inch somewhere when you get online and you look at them, but I forget what it is. But this one's called a medium tip. That's what the M in the MPD stands for. That 15 probably means something too, but I don't know. We just bought about 100 of them here last week. We're stocked up on the new color, which is yellow.
I prefer a fine tip, but that's me. Just whatever you get used to.
Yeah. Well, you know, something else, we use the same pen for marking on our lids. That's our bookkeeping. We do our bookkeeping on our lids. Well, we have a book that will keep track of what we did in a yard, but for each individual colony, we just write it on the lid. If it's, if we introduced a cell or whatever, if it's swarmed, whatever, we just put a couple letters and the date, and it means something to us. And when we come back 3 or 4 weeks later, whenever we get back, we can look at the lid and then we know what to expect. They should have a brand new queen or something, and we know what to look for.
Also,
and if you use the same color of the year that you're in, like this year will be yellow, then we'll know if it's in yellow that it's from that year. White didn't work too good. We had to get black markers, to carry in our pockets. But the year before, what was the year before? Blue or something. So we can look at the color and tell what the print was from, so we know it's that season.
You start to say something else, Al?
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead.
I heard somebody talking in the background. They couldn't see where to raise their hand. If you got a question, just ask her. There's not that many people here.
Malcolm.
Go ahead, Malcolm.
All right. This might be a silly question. It might just be me and my personality and approaching people, but I'm running out of friends in order to put large amounts of hives on. So basically just run through how you would contact someone you don't know and approach them and try to talk them into letting you put some hives on the property for several years.
Your simple question is going to get a simple answer. I just go knock on the door. I mean, if I see a spot and it looks like it would suit me, I'll just go knock on the door and say, hi, I'm a beekeeper. And, and you get some pretty weird looks sometimes, but every once in a while I just say, oh, okay, yeah, we like bees. Sure, why not? And that's how I used to get bee yards. These days, I'm so well known in my area that I actually have people approaching me all the time saying, do you need a place to put bees? But 30 years ago, I just literally knocked on doors.
And you're basically just giving them a quart, 2 quarts a year, or I mean, what kind of deal do you work out?
I give them a case of quartz a year. And some people don't want it. Some people are happy with a 1 or 2 pound jar or a gallon jug, but I'm happy to give them a case of quarts if they'll use it.
Oh yeah, because a good yard,
Oh,
that's cheaper. All
yeah.
right, I just didn't know, I just feel strange just walking up to somebody I don't know and just approaching them. I
Yeah.
guess I just got to get over that to grow.
I do
Thank
it.
you.
I hate it, but I do it or did it. And I'm like you. I really didn't like doing it, but you got to do it sometimes.
My dad always said, son, you can ask them, the worst they can tell you is no.
Can you what?
Dad always used to say, you can ask, and the worst they can do is tell you no.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, you might get a hell no once in a while, but
Yeah, every once
that's
in a while.
okay.
Well, I'm a married man, so I'm used to hearing no, so I probably shouldn't have any problems with it.
Yeah, yeah.
All right,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
Lee, go ahead.
Hey, just to kind of chime in on Malcolm's question, some of the ways I get my yards, I've only got 4, but all of them I've got through my local farmers market. Anybody that's buying honey from me, a lot of times they'll ask, "Hey, do you ever look for somewhere to put your bees?" And I've gained 3 more yards like that.
Yeah. You can put an ad if you're a small town. You can put an ad in your little local paper, and I've heard people doing that and having some success.
Well, I know some places that's a hard thing to do, but around here, it for me anyway. I mean, I'm like you. I turn people down. I got so many yards that you don't take care. You get too many, you don't take care of them right.
Yeah, I'm always looking to upgrade my situation. We're in a fairly mountainous area, and it's hard to get level yards where we can get a truck and a forklift in. And so quite often I'll pick up a new yard to replace another one that was real close by that wasn't quite as convenient to use. Getting level ground around here is tough.
Kenny, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess this is a question for both of you. What uh, what type of longevity are you seeing in your queens? Are you getting 2 years, 3 years? What's the age of most of your queens?
Go ahead, Bob.
Okay. Well, our queens do pretty good for 2 years, but I'm a proponent of replacing them every year. And because I like to increase my odds of success, I have a lot of queens every year that are 2 years old and they're doing a good job, but I kill them anyway because I know the odds of getting through the next winter and having a good strong colony the following spring are much greater if I replace her. So that's kind of and you have a little less swarming with the younger queens. Brother Adam talked about in his book, Beekeeping at Buckfast Abbey, about a second season queen being more productive. And he's actually right, kind of. If you get a late season queen, the next spring, she'll be one of your best queens. But by the following winter, she's going into her second winter. And I think the spring after that, your odds of having a good colony are much lower. So we do try to replace our queens every year. If they swarm, that's a new queen. If they supersede, that's a new queen. And if we replace them, that's a new queen. So that's why I try to replace them every year, just to keep my productivity per colony up and winter survival up.
Well, around here, the queens they don't stay around long enough. They're in and out the door. But breeders, I've had real good luck. The longest I've had a breeder to live is 4 years, and was still doing a pretty good job as a breeder. I mean, that's an artificial or eye-eyed breeder.
Do you keep your breeders kind of in a small colony so they're not laying lots of eggs?
I should, but I don't.
Yeah.
They do. A lot of people think that an artificial or an eye-eyed queen is not a good production queen, but I'll put my breeders up against any of them. They'll get in there and they'll make a heck of a colony.
Yeah, they can. Used to be I was getting breeders from Sue Kobe, and hers would last a couple years anyway, at least. She did I don't know artificial insemination much. I don't know the difference between a good job and a bad job, but you can tell who's doing a good job because the queens last longer.
Well, the guy I learned from, Sue Kobe taught him. So
Oh, yeah.
that's who I learned from too.
Yeah, Shabu learned from Sue, and he's been out to see her several times, 3 or 4 times, and he's getting it down. He said it took him about 2 years to where he thought he was starting to do a good job. And I think he's in his 3rd or 4th year now, and I've got 2 of his breeder queens right now, and he's doing a good job.
I'm going to say it took me 3 years to get it down to pat.
Yeah.
It really did.
Did you see that? Did you see that video I put
I did.
out?
I did.
That turned out okay. That was fascinating.
It surprises me that he doesn't use any antibiotic.
He does. That's not in there.
No, I didn't see that in because I thought, man,
Yeah, he does. One of the fluids he uses.
okay. Extender. They call it extender sometimes, but it's an antibiotic.
Yeah, it's in there. I know his accent makes it a little hard to understand some of the things he's describing, but he does. He uses and gets it off of Amazon of all places. But yeah, he's using it.
Okay, I started to say there's some guys out there that don't use it and they have a lot of.
I think I'm right. I know. Well, maybe I'm confusing that with sterility. He sterilizes everything over and over.
Oh yeah, you got to do that. But
I might be confusing it with the fluid he's buying to do that.
Well, it probably didn't show that because you would do that when he was collecting the semen, and you guys didn't focus on the collection of the semen too much in that video.
Yeah. Now, the main thing I learned from going over and doing that video with him is that I got no business getting involved in that. I don't have the time, and I'll leave it to the experts.
Yeah. Any more questions? Yeah, here we got one up there. Go ahead. Oaks, go ahead.
Hey, Bob, Joe, thank y'all for hosting the call. And again, Bob, thank you for your time. Met you at Hive Life, a fine fella. My question is, whenever you are requeening, assuming, you can keep your bees stimulated throughout the summer, such that there's not really a dearth, is there any particular season that you would rather be replacing queens based off of when they're mated, whether it's summer or fall?
Well, I'll tell you that a lot of people make a big mistake by trying to get the very earliest queens out of these queen producers, these southern producers putting queens out in mid-March. You don't want those queens. They're pushing the envelope. And I admit that some years they're quite fine. And maybe it was an early season, whatever. But the odds are a little bit against getting a really good queen that's not going to get superseded and you're going to have trouble with. In South Georgia, I recommend that people purchasing queens at least wait till the latter part of the last week in March or 1st of April would be better because you're just going to simply get a better queen. I also think that a lot of people that have trouble with packages, they're blaming it on the packages. I think in a lot of cases, it's the queen because these queens were produced so early. So that's one thing I would recommend is not doing the very earliest queens. And we have pretty good mating in our area all the way up into September. But obviously the very best mating is in mid to late spring when you have so many drones. That's the best time for producing a high quality queen, in my opinion, in our area. But I really like the results of requeening in late summer or early fall. I think that gives us our best scenario, but we can't do it we can't do all our colonies at that time of year. First of all, we're in a dearth and robbing is horrendous, and trying to requeen when robbing is bad is tough. If you only got a few colonies, that's one thing, but we really try to requeen during a honey flow when we can, just so we get good acceptance.
Bob, we talked about this earlier. Trying to find lids and double screens. I know you use 3/4 HDO.
Yeah.
I found some 1/2-inch MDO. Will that work as well?
Well, MDO and HDO are made much the same way. The difference between them is that HDO has that plastic I call it plastic. It's some sort of resin veneer that's on the outside of the sheet that really makes them impervious to water. And MDO does not have that, but I think they use the same glue and type of process for manufacturing. MDO, as long as if we're talking about the same product, MDO is what they use a lot for signboard, real estate signs or, signs that get painted. So it's pretty tough stuff. If you paint it well, it will probably perform just as well as HDO.
Okay, I know HDO has become really difficult to find.
It
And
is, yeah.
go to Atlanta, you got to buy a lot of it. So
Well, we just bought a unit of HDO, about 3/4 HDO, about 2 weeks ago, and it cost us $105 a sheet, and that's by the unit.
yeah,
And it's just, but they had it, and what they have now, I'm not familiar with. It came from Russia, and what we've gotten in the past has come from Canada. The very best HDO I've run across is produced in Oregon from Roseburg Wood Products, Roseburg Lumber Products. It's Roseburg. I forget the second word. They make the best HDO I've run across, but you don't see it on the East Coast very often. This stuff from Canada sometimes can have just a very, very slight warp to the whole sheet. And I've argued with the people we buy it from. I'd say, gosh, can you give me a unit that's not warped? And they say, none of it's warped. I said, well, yeah, it is. Almost every unit's got a little warp. What they consider a warp and what I consider a warp are two different things. Now, this stuff that came from Russia is absolutely flat, but it's made with birch rather than fir. So I'm not quite sure what to expect out of it, but we're going to work with this unit and see what happens.
I'll touch back on the queens. A lot of the trouble with the package bees and the queens, that's their business. They got to get them out the door. They're dealing with such high volumes that they put them queens out there or sell out there in 10 to 12 days. They pull that queen.
That's right. Yeah.
And, a good queen, she needs to lay at least 21 days before you pull her.
Yeah.
And that stops a lot of the supersedure.
It does. Yeah. That fella, Doug Somerville in Australia, he did a study on that. If you go, let's see, which video is it? It's, I did it in Charleston, South Carolina. It's called Queen Acceptance and Supersedure or something like that. That video that I put out, if you go to the video description, there's a link to that study, and it's really fascinating. And he just flat out proved that you got to wait you got to have at least a 21-day cycle to get good results. And the difference between 21 days and 14 days is extremely dramatic. It's not just a little bit, it's a bunch.
Yeah.
And then when you go to 28 days, it's even better. And then beyond 28 days, you've reached the point of diminishing returns. It's not really, there's not a lot of point in trying to go farther than that. From a commercial point of view where you're selling queens, it is obviously better to wait a couple months, but at some point you got to get that thing out of the nuke and cellar. But 21 to 28 days is really the sweet spot where you're getting the most bang for your buck in your time.
Well, people always want queens here early, but
Oh,
they got to understand, I hold them 3 weeks to lay, and I've got 2 weeks getting her there. So I got a 5 weeks lag time.
That's right.
From the first queen, even though the weather is just beautiful. I mean, I got a 5-week lag, and I thought about going to 28 days, but I have pretty good luck with
read that study. It might sell you on going down to 28 days. It works fine at 28 days.
Yep,
Good enough. Yeah.
That's 6 weeks. Then I got lag time though, and I only got so many time to turn them around.
Yeah. Well, so when you say 21 days or 21 days, is that from ripe cell to?
That's from the time the cell hatches till I pull them. 21 days.
Yeah, that's a good time. That's what Chris Werner does. Chris used to be 21. Now he's on 24 for, I don't know how he ended up on that odd thing, but yeah, that 21 days works. That's the point where you're beginning to hit the sweet spot.
Got another question here. Garden State apiaries. Go ahead. Nope, we're not hearing you. Unmute yourself.
It's unmuted. Yeah, how about
There
now?
you go. There you go. Yeah.
I'm too quick on the trigger.
Yeah.
Quick request for Bob, with all due respect to your friend Zeth. I was wondering if you might be able to do a video for the sideliner that is a little bit more sophisticated than a 55-gallon drum syrup distribution system, but not so sophisticated as a large, commercial guy. So I'm a sideliner.
Yeah.
I'd like to try to get something that's, a little bit more than 55 gallons. It's going to fit in the back of a Chevy 1500. So just an idea. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, you can do exactly what Seth did and use a tote. And just because it's a tote doesn't mean you have to fill it. I mean, those things are heavy when they're full, but you can put 100 gallons in them. And I did that for a long time. In fact, the pump that you saw in Seth's video, that was my pump. And I used to just hang that on the side of a tote, and it worked great.
That's the big thing is then I got to take the damn tote out of the back of the truck. And
Well, that's the problem. They're heavy. Beyond 55-gallon drum, I don't know.
I'm thinking of
Well,
something
I'll
like
tell you.
like a power washer tank or something
Well,
along that line.
Tractor,
Fertilizer tank.
yeah, I was just gonna say Tractor Supply sells an 80-gallon plastic tank that lays sideways. It's meant for going on a trailer behind an ATV for spraying or something. And I've seen a couple guys use those, and they work really good. They kind of put them on a pallet so they can lift them off with a tractor or something, and the pump and the battery and everything's right there. And even the one I'm thinking of has a hose reel too, and he's got it all just packaged right there on a small pallet. And he's using the same type of pump that Seth is using. And one recommendation, if you ever do get around to using a hose reel, that's one place where you don't want to scrimp on the money. Most hose reels have a very small diameter orifice in the swivel. Like if you go down to Home Depot or Ace Hardware and just get a typical hose reel that you put out in your backyard, it gets really restricted at that point where the swivel is. If you get a commercial brand like a Reelcraft, is the brand we buy and use, you can get them where the orifice is large. The ones we use are 1 inch, and the orifice is 1 inch too, but you spend a lot of money getting that reel. But for a long time, we didn't use a reel at all. We just coiled the hose on the truck bed, and then you had even less restrictions. So yeah, those 80-gallon tanks work good. They really do. Tractor Supply.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We got any other questions, guys? Bob, I appreciate your time. I don't want to hold you up all night, and it's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, glad to be here. It's always fun. Talking to it's kind of funny when I go home or I work around here. I don't have a lot of beekeepers to talk to unless it's a customer in the store, and so these kind of things are kind of fun for me too.
I like to do the bee chat where you don't have to get a presentation up and have to worry about doing a presentation. I mean, you can answer a question. Worst you can say, I don't know the answer. And I do that a lot.
I do that a lot. Yeah, I don't know, or give them somebody else's name that might know. Yeah. Yeah, it's been fun, Joe. This is our second one. Thank you for asking me. I appreciate it. And I know not a lot of people have chimed in. You have 25 participants, and I hope it was worthwhile for them too.
I hope so too. There, we got one more question. Go ahead, Malcolm. We're not hearing you if you're talking, Malcolm. You're not unmuted.
Okay, I had to move. I was on my phone. I had to keep moving it over. Before you go, Bob, he brought up a good point that I forgot and I wanted to ask about. I know you were showing on one of your things how you use the small electric. I think are they 12-volt pumps? Could you, while you're here, tell us what you think's a good pump for a guy using like an 80-gallon?
Well, that pump I show in that video is a dandy pump. The only problem with it is it's expensive. It's gosh, I forget, that particular pump is $800 or something. But it works great up to about 1.5 to 1 syrup. If you try to pump 2 to 1 with it, and if it's cold outside, it doesn't like it. If the syrup is fairly warm, it'll pump 2 to 1 okay. But we routinely pump 1 to 1 or perhaps 1.5 to 1. So We've been very happy with that pump. I have less trouble with that than I do or did with the type of pump that you see in Seth's video. Those diaphragm pumps do not do well. If they get a wad of dead bees in there, it just screws them all up. That gear pump shown in my video with my truck, that grinds bees up and spits them out. And it's kind of hard to keep every single bee out of a tote or a drum. Now, it won't pump sticks and nails and things like that, but it'll pump dead bees okay. So, and it'll run all day long. I mean, that pump is actually manufactured. It's meant for putting on ships or large boats like fishing boats to supply fresh water around the boat. And so they're made for marine applications. So they're no joke. That's a real pump. And I like them. Does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, the $800 just shot me in the wall. I think I'll
Yeah.
scoop a trash pump and squeeze it off the pressure.
Yeah, there's so many ways of doing it. But those pumps, it's like Seth uses, that's a pretty inexpensive way to go, and they do work. I used them for years.
And where do you think where did he get his, or the brand? Do you know?
Well, we've had really good luck with FlowJet. FlowJet is not the cheapest brand, but we've had good luck with them. And if you want to spend just a little extra money, you can order them from Depco Pump in Florida, and you can actually order them with a switch, like the one that Seth has came with a 45-pound switch, which works, but it makes it hard to pull the trigger on a gas pump type of nozzle. If you can tone that switch down to 35 pounds, you can pull that nozzle a lot easier. It still has the same volume, it just shuts off at a little lower pressure. And a Depco pump, I forget, it's an extra 40 or 50 or 60 bucks to get that lower switch on it. And the last one of those I bought was like $212, but Seth's got it. I used it for 2 years, and now Seth's got it. So it's been pretty good.
All right, I appreciate that. They spelled Depco, DEPCO.
Yes, and you can see their link in that video. I think it's Feeding Bees part 3 or 4, where it's the same video where you see that me showing the reel and the pump and all that on our truck. I think there's a link at the bottom of that video for Depco pump.
Thank you once again. I appreciate it very
You
much.
bet.
You
Yeah.
have a blessed day, and hope to see you next year at the Hive Live.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
One more question. Jim Duffy, you got a question?
Yeah, just a quick one. Do you like wintering? Well, your winters are really mild there. And up north, like the Canadian Ian Stepler, he'll winter in just a 1 deep.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Well, we do everything. Everything works for me. I prefer double deeps. I understand the wisdom behind all of the different systems. You know, in a single story colony, your mite treatments are more efficient. With double deeps, you can put on so much more honey and food so that you don't have to feed them right off the bat. If you notice, when Ian pulls them singles out of the barn, he's getting some buckets on them pretty soon.
Yeah.
With a double deep, we don't worry. I mean, they go into winter with 100 pounds of food, you know, and sometimes we never do get around to feeding them. They don't need it. So, and then double deeps, we do a lot of splitting and selling nukes. And with double deeps, you have so much more to work with. And now I can't speak for Canada or Indiana or anywhere else, but I can tell you in Northeast Georgia that our clusters are always bigger in a double deep than they are in a single. It's just the way it works here. And so I prefer the double deep, but I also like working singles when it's time to find a queen or treat for mites or anything like that. So there's pros and cons to both of them. We work with both. We have singles and double deeps every year because we start new colonies early in the spring with a small nuke and run them up to a single to make sourwood honey. And usually we'll overwinter them like that. And then the following year, they'll become a double deep.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, appreciate your time. I appreciate
you.
everybody coming and participating, and we'll do it again next time.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. See you later.
Good night, guys.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Joe.
All right, y'all have a good night.
Thank y'all.
Thank you all.